Assalamu alaikum and welcome to video 2 from chapter 10.1. This covers Alef lesson 104, fossil formation. So when we look at the formation of fossils, an organism dies. For example, this fish died and falls to the bottom of the river during a flood or some event, and its body is quickly covered in sediment. So it's buried in mud and sand and other sediments, and then the fleshy part of that fish decomposes, leaving the hard parts or the bones. I'm sorry, this picture was cut off, but this picture comes directly from the book. But through uplift, so if you remember from grade 6, there's uplift of the sediments. So the sediments will uplift, and this fossilized remain will be pushed to the top. So there's certain conditions that you must have in order to have formation of fossils. Organisms are most likely to become a fossil if it has hard parts like shells, teeth, bone, because hard parts do not decay easily. They don't break down very easily. So when you see this fish, it has a soft outer part of muscles and other tissue. And then when you come to picture 2, all of those soft parts have decomposed or decayed, leaving only the hard bone. Also, you want the organism to be buried quickly under mud or sediment, because that also slows down the decaying process. You can have fossils that are very large, like dinosaur bones. So if you go to most natural history museums, they will have your large fossils. But if you look very closely, you can also see microfossils. So they might have slides and microscopes and such, where you can see very teeny tiny microscopes, very teeny tiny fossils under the microscope. Okay, so we're going to look at, and please forgive my typos here. Let me go ahead and fix that. Okay, so we have different types of fossils. One type of fossils, type of preservation is called preserved remains. So we can have preserved remains of organisms where the complete organism is saved. So if you go to the zoo, you can buy these in the gift shop, but this is a piece of amber that has encased this spider. So it has wrapped around this spider. The spider got trapped in there, however millions or thousands of years ago, and we can see now the whole spider. The same thing happens in areas that have large glaciers or a lot of ice, where a whole organism can be saved within an ice block and preserved for thousands of years. Okay, so at the beginning we saw there was some sort of maybe lizard fossil. Here we can see a plant. So sometimes when an organism is buried, you have heat and pressure pushing down on that organism, releasing gas and liquids. Remember, organisms are mostly made of carbon. So that carbon that is being pressed out will leave an imprint or picture known as a carbon film. A carbon film is a fossilized carbon outline of an organism. So you can see carbon we usually associate with charcoal or being black. So this is a black print created because of the pressure and heat pressing down on this plant, releasing the gases and liquids. Okay, another type of preservation is mineral replacement, and we can find mineral replacement in petrified wood. So petrified wood is a type of wood that has been changed to a rock. So minerals or sediment will enter into the pores of this piece of wood here. So it's hard to see, but this is a piece of wood back here. And instead of having that wood texture, it is now becoming a rock over thousands or hundreds and thousands of years. The wood gets replaced by rock from the sediment and minerals that fill it. Another type of preservation are molds and casts, which are very much closely related. So a mold forms, or a mold is the impression left on a rock by an ancient organism. So here we have a mold of this seashell here. So this is a mold. It's impression or pressed into this rock. A mold can form when sediment hardens around an organism, then the organism decays after, leaving its shape behind. A cast, on the other hand, is when that mold gets filled. So here's the cast on this side, I guess. The cast is when that mold gets filled with sediment, and then you can pull that cast out from the mold, and then you have a 3D a shape of the organism that had died here. So you can think of this also, we use molds for making cakes. So if you want a heart-shaped cake, you would use a heart-shaped mold, and then the cake that comes out of that mold would be your heart-shaped cast. Okay, so molds and casts are the impression is the mold, and the shape that comes out of the impression is your cast. We often use molds when you're playing with clay or Play-Doh. You might use a mold in order to create a cast of an animal. The next type of preservation we have is trace fossils. Some animals can leave fossilized traces of their movement or activity. So if something once lived in an area, you can sometimes find their remains in the form of footprints. You can find nests or left behind feathers or poop, you know, different things that show, if we're talking about humans, we can find artifacts maybe that those humans left, uneaten food, that kind of thing would all be trace fossils, evidence that something living was once here. Footprints can leave evidence or an organism's size, how it traveled. Did it travel in packs or in groups, or did it travel by its alone? Depending on how far those footprints are apart or how they change, you can tell if an organism was running or if it was walking. All of these things are types of trace fossil that give scientists or paleontologists information about how organisms lived or how the environment was in the past. Now that concludes Alef lesson 102. And we will move into Alef lesson 105. I think these numbers are wrong. So hopefully you will tune into the next slide or the next video, and this is helpful in helping you prepare and study for what's to come.